Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 4 of The Breakdown. I'm your host, Essince from Royal Air Entertainment. I want to thank everybody for sticking with me. Last week, I had to take a little time off. You can hear I'm still a little bit congested. Good old-fashioned cold. Yep, it's not the dreaded C word, but I was out for a little bit, and yeah, back and happy to be here and healthy. This week's breakdown is really interesting. I wanted to talk about who profits from releases of music after the creators die. So we're going to talk about who profits from the posthumous releases. But first, I want to get into a couple pretty interesting headlines. Dr. Dre is stated to star in Grand Theft Auto online story expansion. So Rockstar Games announced that he's going to be a playable character in a segment called The Contract featuring Dr. Dre. So allhiphop.com stated, "The Contract brings back Franklin Clinton, one of Grand Theft Auto 5's main characters, for a story centered around Dr. Dre. In the expansion, Clinton runs a celebrity solutions agency and gets hired to help out the hip-hop mogul." So definitely going to have to check out that. I might have to upgrade my gaming system to be able to check that out. I've only ever had the OG Sega Genesis, but I got the 6-button controller. But I don't expect this is going to come out for that, so I might need to check into some new hardware. The next one I want to get into is Drake and Kanye are holding a benefit concert at the LA Memorial Coliseum tomorrow in honor of Larry Hoover. Larry Hoover, for those who aren't familiar, was the founder of the Gangster Disciples, who's currently serving multiple life sentences. The concert is held as part of an effort to, quote, raise awareness for Larry Hoover's incarceration and garner support for prison and sentencing reform. It's going to live stream on all of the Amazon platforms, Amazon Music, Prime Video, Amazon Music, the Music Twitch channel, and then it's going to be up for demand after that. But I'm going to keep this episode brief, but I wanted to break down and talk a little bit about the idea and the concept of the posthumous release. And this is something that's really interesting, especially recently. We've had a lot of artists pass away, be murdered, died from diseases. Obviously, it's a part of life that people die. But what happens to our intellectual property when we die? What happens when authors die and someone finds unreleased book notes? What happens when people go into the vault and find old Whitney Houston songs that were never released, especially with hip hop? What happens to this music? And it's really interesting if you think, and a lot of people forget, that Biggie's second album came out in 1997, Life After Death, actually came out after his death. Life After Death, which is one of my favorite albums. The album's incredible. It came out 16 days after he was shot. And 2 albums then came out after that. And some fans and critics kind of felt like maybe it was thrown together. And that's me being polite. I listened to everything that's come out, but some of the fans weren't too nice about it. And sometimes they cite that these are releases and songs that he would never have done if he were alive. They're like, man, Biggie didn't rock with that dude. I don't know why he's got a verse on this album as if they were cool. And some people are really upset about it. And this happened recently with Pop Smoke's album, rest in peace. But some people felt that it was more like a compilation album that featured Pop Smoke instead of a Pop Smoke album that had features from some of these artists. And I want to throw a word in to describe some of this. And when I hear some of the people who just assume right away, oh, this is just a cash grab for the labels. They're just trying to make money. They don't care about this. Not to say that isn't true. Not to say that some of these things have not been done just to make money and to help raise money. My favorite rapper of all time, Big Pun, had a couple projects that came out after his death as well. And I remember seeing in an interview, Fat Joe said something about working with the family, Pun's family, and releasing some of this material in order to help the family out, to help raise money and give something back to the family. I know there's a lot more to that story, and maybe we'll get into it in another day, but there are some people who look at it only as a cash grab from the label, and people who don't understand the culture or anything. And it's difficult to say. It's easy to be cynical like that, and to think that people who aren't, I don't know how to phrase this. The word that comes to mind is a term that we use in wrestling. For those of you who don't know, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. But there's a term called mark, and there's another term called a smark. I want to break that down real quick. Mark actually came from carnival days. Carnies would use this, and it was a term for someone who kind of stood out in the crowd as someone who would believe the show and kind of be a sucker. And they use it in wrestling when, man, if you go in Instagram comments or under a YouTube video, you'll see that a lot when people who really get into the characters, whether, back in the day, Stone Cold doing this and, treated it as if it were real. They really got wrapped up in the show of it. They would call them marks. And it's a derogatory term. Like, it's not nice. And then you have smarks, which are like the smart marks. And those are the people who are still marks for the industry, but they believe that they're above it. They think that they're smart and they know what's actually going on behind the scenes, and this is what's really happening. And that kind of comes to mind when I read these things, when people are just so cynical about the business. And again, I'm not trying to defend the music or entertainment industry. It's as dirty as people think it is, but there's a lot more to it. There's so many times when things could have been done differently by the artists. There are times when people have agreed to things in contracts and then go back on, like, the artist goes back on their word, and it messes some things. There's a lot more to it. It's not that the industry is clean and safe and friendly and fair. That's absolutely not true. But they aren't always the big bad wolf that we treat them like, right? So when things like this happen, when DMX, God rest the dead's album came out, was released afterwards, people were mad at that. Oh man, you just let this man rest. Don't put this out. You're just vultures trying to eat off of. But we don't know what was going on. Maybe he wanted this album to come out. Maybe these artists had unreleased music that they did want to come out. Some artists like Tyler, the Creator, and Anderson .Paak have stated, like, yo, don't put my stuff out. If I die before I release these things, let them stay dead. Let them stay in the underground. It wasn't intended for release. Maybe these things weren't finished. Maybe they were working on projects and had a falling out with somebody or issues with rights. You never really know. But and it could be something done and recorded in venting and frustration, and that's not something that you want out to the general public. There are a lot of reasons, but sometimes maybe there's a contractual obligation. Maybe the album was finished. Maybe cover art was selected, but the release date hadn't been finalized yet. There are times when the fans just want to hear more, and maybe the family and the A&Rs and the people around the artist who loved and supported the artist go, man, he would want this or she would want this, to be out to the public. They want the fans to have this. There are a lot of reasons, and it's very confusing and it's very complicated. And at the end of the day, it comes down to two things, and sometimes just one. And that is, one, what are the artist's wishes? But more often than not, who owns the rights? It all comes down to that, guys. Who owns it? That's it. Who has the rights to this music because they make the decisions? Whether we like it or not, whoever owns it can do what they want with it. Just wanted to give you guys a little something to think about. So thank you for tuning in this week. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment. You know, this is everywhere. The podcast is everywhere from Google Podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. I'm really happy to have you tuning in. Make sure you catch me here next week. I love you guys. Thank you. Be safe. Peace.